Good morning, everyone. This is Father Nate, missionary priest in Italy, and thanks for joining us today, February 23rd, on No Greater Delight, our podcast on Marian feasts and Marian meditations. Well, today we have, we think, two major feasts. The first is the one mentioned by Abbot Orsini, who says that on this day they celebrated Our Lady of Roches, or the Rock, as it would be, near Salamanca in Spain. An image is venerated there, which was found miraculously in the year 434 by Simon Vela, who caused a church to be built there. So, so the Simon mentioned by the Abbot Orsini was actually born in the year 1401 in Paris, France, right? The incident that Orsini says took place in 434 actually took place in 1434, but that's getting a little bit ahead. So let's talk about this guy, Simon. He was born on September 4th, 1401 in Paris to pious and wealthy parents. He grew up as a practicing Catholic. He despised money and luxury, and so that when he grew up and inherited his parents' money and property, he recognized that it could be a threat for his salvation. And so he gave everything he owned away to the church and to help the poor. When the money was gone, he went to a Franciscan monastery and just took up a position working there. Obviously, he spent a lot of time in prayer, and he was especially devoted to the Blessed Mother. Sometimes he would pray and ask if the Mother of God had anything special that, would be particularly pleasing to her. So one of these occasions, he fell asleep while praying. He was suddenly awakened when he heard a voice speak to him and said, "Simon, wake up. Be on the watch. From now on, your name will be Simon Vela. Go to Penna de Francia, for there you will find the shrine of the Blessed Virgin Mary." So Simon set out, and for 5 years, he searched all over the place trying to find this place, Penna di Francia, right? And he couldn't even find anybody who'd ever heard of it. So he had reached the point of wanting to give up. After 5 years, I don't blame him. And he had already begun working his way back home from Spain when a voice spoke to him from the darkness again, saying, "Simon, do not give up the search. Do not give up what you have begun. Persevere, and your labors will be compensated." And so he did. And so he continued walking, and he was passing through the market square in Salamanca on his way to the Church of Santiago when he observed two men who began shouting in a serious disagreement. Right? Weapons flashed, and one of the pair fell wounded at Simon's feet. The other was restrained from finishing the man off by the crowd, who held him back. Unable to reach his adversary, he shouted out, "Had I killed my enemy, I would have escaped to Penna de Francia, where no one, not even the king, could find me." It says that Simon's heart leapt for joy when he heard this. Yeah, poor guy who's, lying stabbed at his feet, but okay, be that as it may. Because it's the first time somebody had actually ever mentioned the place, right? And later, he ran into a traveling merchant, and he asked the man where he came from, and he said, "Oh, Penna de Francia." So he said, "Would you please take me there?" And he said, "No," right? All he did was point out the general direction, right? And so anyways, he keeps going. He followed that general direction. He ended up in a small town called San Martin de Castanar, and he found a church there, and after Mass, he asked if anybody knew Penna de Francia, and then somebody pointed out a hill in the far distance, right? So he got there, he was hungry, and then he found a cave, and he said, "Okay, well, where is this shrine that I'm supposed to find?" He couldn't find it, right? And so he kept digging, searching for things, blah, blah, blah. He couldn't find it, and he said, "Well, what am I even doing here?" Right? He was very, very tired. At some point, he saw Our Lady again and said, "Look, build on this hill a shrine, right? You're to begin it, and others are going to finish it." Okay? He says, "Okay." So he kept excavating, he was digging, and then he was told again, "Simon, don't undertake this task alone. Bring more people to help you off." Okay? And so he went off, and he got 5 more men to help him out. And so they were digging and digging, and they said, "Oh, we must be digging for hidden treasure." And he said, Yeah. And so he said, "It's, much, as he said, an objective worthier than worldly goods, and it was something their hearts would forever cherish." Good call, Simon. So finally, on May 19th, 1434, they removed a huge stone, and underneath it they found several smaller rocks and the image of the Blessed Virgin Mary with the Divine Child, right? Which is known as Our Lady of the Rocks, right? So, years later, the Dominicans would actually build the church, the convent, and a hospice to accommodate pilgrims, right? So that is the story of Our Lady of the Rock, What exactly, again, it has to do with today, we don't know, but that's what Abbot Orsini says. I trust his wisdom. And for the record, there's actually a number of shrines with similar names, right? There's a Madonna del Sasso in Locarno in Switzerland, where the Franciscans established a house, right? In the same country, there's also a pilgrimage chapel called St. Mary of the High Rocks, right? And also one at Castel Sant'Elia, which you have to climb up 144 steps to get there, right? But the second celebration today takes us, yes, into Pesaro in Pinnavilli in Italy, where they celebrate Madonna delle Grazie, Our Lady of Grace, or also called Madonna di San Cristoforo, Our Lady of Saint Christopher. So this is the reason why it's called that is because it's a long tradition of veneration of Our Lady of Grace in the very old church of Saint Christopher, right? And the devotion is linked to an intervention of Our Lady on behalf of the city. On February 23rd, 1517, the image appeared surrounded by light above the city walls, right? And what that did is it made the Florentine militants, soldiers, who had come to destroy the city, flee. This prodigy was repeated on February 23rd, okay, it's the same day, 5 years later, 1522. And so that is what's happening in the Marian world today, February 23rd. So for today's Marian meditation, taken from the book by Father Ildefonso Villar, we start with meditation 41, entitled The Divine Birth. So here we're actually going to talk about the birth of Jesus and some of the conditions and circumstances surrounding it. So today, our meditation will be just on one point. It's rather brief. Tomorrow, we consider the birth of Jesus, which is a long point. And then finally, on the last day, we'll consider two more shorter points. So today, we consider the ingratitude of his own people. See how literally the words of the gospel are fulfilled. They who were his own gave him no welcome. What ignorance of the things of God! If only those people had suspected what was going to happen that blessed night. When there is a real submission to the will of God, we should not care as to the why and wherefore of God's dispositions. On the other hand, if those people of Bethlehem could find an excuse in their ignorance, have not we ourselves been granted 1,000 proofs to enable us to know the things of God, and so ascertain who he is and where he can be found? Ask pardon from our Lord for the very many times you barred your heart against his entrance, for the many times he wanted to perform some good through you, and you hindered him. For today's reading from The Admirable Heart of Mary by St. John Eudes, we can read the conclusion of chapter 3, The Justice of God Mirrored in the Admirable Heart of Mary. In the second place, divine justice had so completely filled her heart with such an unfathomable hatred for sin, that this holy virgin was always ready to undergo the sufferings of as many hells as God's omnipotence could create, rather than commit the least venial sin. What is still more admirable, however, is that, having the same heart and mind as the Eternal Father, according to the inspired word, he who is joined to the Lord is one spirit, that's from 1 Corinthians 6:17, Our Lady united her will to his concerning the passion of her Son, and gave her consent to the painful death of her dearly beloved, so that he might destroy sin. This sacrifice demonstrates a hatred of sin greater than the suffering, the torments of all imaginable hells to cooperate in its destruction. For it cannot be doubted that if Our Lady had given her choice, she would have preferred all the sufferings for herself rather than see the treatment inflicted on her beloved Son at the time of his cruel and ignominious passion. If the Holy Heart of Mary is filled with such terrible hatred of sin that she consented to the cruel death of her beloved Son, because she saw him loaded with the sins of men, if she readily sacrificed him to divine justice in order to crush the mortal enemy of God and men, who can doubt that she still hates the infernal monster wherever she finds it? She hates sin to the point of sometimes uniting herself to divine vengeance in order to destroy it in souls, especially in those souls who are their own enemies, to the extent of supporting evil and opposing its destruction. They force their sweet mother, as it were, to relinquish the tenderness of her maternal love and to participate in the severity of divine justice, in order to punish the obduracy of a rebellious soul hardened in battle. O most holy Virgin, since you have but one heart and one spirit with your divine Son, and since you have no other sentiments save his, you do love what he loves, and thus you do hate what he hates. Hence, as Christ has infinite hatred for sin, you also hate it beyond all thought and words. Your hatred for the infernal monster is equal to the love you have for God. O Blessed Mother, the love of your heart for God is infinitely greater than that of all the hearts of the angels and saints. Consequently, there is in your heart more hatred against God's enemy, sin, than in all the hearts of all heaven's citizens. Make us sharers, O Mary, in this love and hatred, so that we may love our Creator and Savior as you have loved him, and that we may hate sin as you have hated it.
Hello, and we hope that you enjoyed listening to our Marian podcast. In the spirit of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, we say to you that there is no greater delight than to spread the devotion of Our Lady. We hope you share these sentiments and encourage you greatly to share with a loved one. Know that you are always in our prayers, and we ask that you keep us in yours. God bless.